the turbulent beginning in the late 18th century. New York was a city in transformation, bustling yet unpolished, hopeful yet uncertain, a frontier of trade rising from the ashes of the American Revolution. The streets were uneven, the harbor smelled of salt, and merchants carried ledgers tucked beneath their arms as they hurried between docks, counting shipments of rum, molasses, furs, and grain. The air carried a strange mix of chaos and opportunity. Money was changing hands constantly. But the system behind those exchanges was fragile, sometimes reliable, often not. There was no unified standard, no official stock exchange, and no established rules governing how securities were bought or sold. Speculation was rampant. Deals were whispered in taverns, and fortunes rose or fell in the span of an afternoon. Bonds issued by the new American government were traded like poker chips, and stocks in early companies, banks, canals, insurance firms moved unpredictably in value. Traders worked independently, each with their own methods, prices, and loyalties, creating an atmosphere ripe for manipulation. Trust was a luxury that few could afford. But as commerce increased and more Americans invested in banks and government securities, the chaos became impossible to ignore. Merchants needed a system, something clear, something enforceable, something trustworthy. The energy of the growing city demanded it. On Wall Street, a narrow lane lined with wooden fences and anchored by a famous buttonwood tree. Brokers gathered informally to negotiate deals. The tree offered shade from the blistering sun and shelter from the rain. But it also became a symbol on unofficial headquarters, where men with ambition and ledgers met in hopes of bringing structure to the free-for-all marketplace. Beneath its branches, conversations began to shift from gossip and rumor to something more serious, forming an organized agreement. They had seen what unregulated trading could bring: wild speculation, angry investors, rumors powerful enough to crash prices, and brokers who simply vanished after making a deal they didn't intend to honor. If New York wished to compete with London and Amsterdam, home to the world's most respected financial centers, it needed something more advanced than whispered promises and scribbled notes. Day by day, the idea of a unified set of rules grew stronger. Early brokers discussed establishing fixed commissions so that customers knew what they would pay. They talked about requiring exclusivity so that trades could only be made among trusted members who honored their word. And most importantly, they knew that without structure, the young American economy could collapse into speculation and fraud. The need for organization was no longer optional, was essential for survival. And in this charged environment of ambition, fear, and possibility, a quiet revolution was about to take place under the shade of the buttonwood tree, where 24 men prepared to sign an agreement that would forever alter the course of financial history. The Buttonwood Agreement. On May 17, 1792, 24 brokers gathered at the familiar buttonwood tree on Wall Street and put pen to parchment. The document they signed was simple, only 2 sentences long, but its impact would echo for centuries. Known as the Buttonwood Agreement, it established 2 clear rules. First, that brokers would trade securities exclusively with one another, ensuring a trustworthy network. Second, that they would charge a minimum commission rate, creating consistency and stability in transactions. These rules might appear modest to the modern world, but at the time, they represented a revolutionary shift, transforming trading from a chaotic marketplace into a regulated profession. For the first time in New York's financial world, there was structure, accountability, and a code of conduct that brokers voluntarily agreed to follow. The men who signed the agreement were not just traders, they were pioneers shaping the financial identity of a growing nation. Most were immigrants or sons of immigrants. Men who understood that trust was the foundation of any market. They needed a system that gave both investors and brokers confidence that trades would be honored and prices would be fair. With the signing of the Buttonwood Agreement, this trust began to take shape. The brokers were no longer independent wanderers chasing rumors across taverns and docks. They were now members of a collective, bound by shared rules and mutual responsibility. They moved their operations indoors, renting a room on Wall Street where they could conduct business more formally. Here, prices were negotiated openly, records were kept, and disputes were resolved professionally. What began under the shade of a tree was slowly transforming into the first organized trading center in the young United States. This new environment encouraged innovation. Trading volume increased as more Americans' wealthy merchants, landowners, government officials, and even ordinary workers began investing in government bonds and early companies. With each successful transaction, confidence in the market grew. The brokers realized that they had not just signed a document, they had created a system capable of supporting an entire economy. The Buttonwood Agreement laid the groundwork for the New York Stock and Exchange Board, which would later evolve into the New York Stock Exchange. Prices were posted publicly, meetings were conducted with order and fairness, and membership became a badge of honor. This structured marketplace attracted investors from across the country, solidifying New York's role as the financial capital of the United States. What began as a humble agreement between 24 men had become the foundation of one of the most powerful financial institutions in world history. Legacy and transformation. The Buttonwood Agreement may have been born in 1792, but its influence stretches across centuries, shaping markets that today move trillions of dollars in capital. Over time, the small group of brokers grew into a sophisticated institution, eventually becoming the New York Stock Exchange, an icon of American capitalism recognized around the world. As the nation expanded, railroads, steel companies, oil empires, and banks turned to the New York Stock Exchange to raise funds. Each listing represented growth, innovation, and the belief that the marketplace, created under the Buttonwood tree, could support the ambitions of an entire country. Wall Street transformed from a simple street into a powerhouse of global finance. But the legacy of the Buttonwood Agreement is not just one of success, it is also a story of adaptation. Over the centuries, markets faced panics, crashes, booms, and busts. The New York Stock Exchange confronted fire, corruption, regulatory reforms, and powerful technological shifts. Telegraphs replaced messengers, telephones replaced telegraphs, computers replaced handwritten tickets, and algorithms replaced shouting traders on the floor. Yet through every era, one principle endured. Markets require structure, trust, and transparency to survive. The brokers in 1792 understood this instinctively. They knew that without rules, finance collapses into chaos and confidence disappears. Their simple two-sentence agreement holds a message that remains relevant today. Trust is the backbone of every financial system. As we look at Wall Street now, with digital trading floors, global markets operating in microseconds, and trillions of dollars flowing across borders, the Buttonwood Agreement serves as a reminder of humble beginnings. It shows that even the world's most powerful financial institutions can grow from something as small as a handwritten promise beneath a tree. The spirit of collaboration and structure that those 24 brokers embraced continues to guide markets today, shaping the systems that govern pensions, savings, investments, and international trade. Their decision did more than create the New York Stock Exchange, laid the foundation for the modern global economy. And as we continue exploring the history of Wall Street, the Buttonwood Agreement stands as the moment where everything began. A turning point where order replaced chaos, trust replaced uncertainty, and a financial empire emerged from the shade of a simple tree on a narrow street in New York City. Next time, we'll meet the ambitious early brokers who turned a humble agreement into a thriving financial network and ignited the rise of Wall Street.